Hey everybody, Dawn here. I'm here with Holli Bassin today, and I'm going to be interviewing her on gut health. So, Holly, if you could take a minute to introduce yourself, that would be great, and then we will jump right in.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you and help your group understand more about gut health. Um, just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I got into health coaching because my daughter she had anaphylactic food allergies. And I was spending most of my time, because I felt so passionate about what I was doing with her, helping other parents um, keep safe from food allergies. I was doing lectures or workshops on food allergy etiquette. Um, and then I was teaching in schools on what to do in emergency situations and how to avoid anaphylaxis in the classroom, especially for preschools.
Mm.
Then in January of 2014, we started working with a nutrition and health coach who devised an integrative method of systematic desensitization. So here I was personally spoon feeding my daughter the things to which she was allergic to in small increasing amounts, whereas professionally I was telling everybody to avoid the things they were allergic to. And I was so intrigued by how we could balance out her microbiome and fix her allergies, or at least downgrade them from an IgE food allergy to a more of a sensitivity, that I went back to school to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And then I wrote a book about my experience with my daughter. Here's the book, From Anaphylaxis to Buttercream. Oh, I don't know if you can see that.
Love it. Yes, love it.
And then that was 2017, April, May. And then in July, I went into the School of Applied Functional Medicine, and I'm still taking classes there because functional medicine is very interconnected and in depth. Um, so that's how I got to where I am today.
Well, that's amazing. How's your daughter doing with her allergies today?
She's doing great. She used to be anaphylactic to dairy, eggs, and mustard. There was a time in her life she couldn't eat peanuts or tree nuts. And when we started working on it, we just did eggs, dairy, and mustard. And now she's eating ice cream. She's eating cheese.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, it's not perfect. We didn't cure her, but
Right.
we sort of reversed the disease process.
Well,
So,
that's pretty impressive. And
yeah.
if people are interested, chime in the comments down below, and maybe we can have Holly come back and talk about allergies too, and the different immune responses. But today we're talking about gut health, right? And one of the questions that I got was really, how do you know if your gut is healthy or not? I mean, let's start with the very basics. How do you know if you've got something to worry about, or if things are, all systems go?
Okay, that's a very good question. And we just start with the basics. I look at, what are your symptoms? Are you having gas and bloating symptoms? Do you have eczema, heartburn, nausea, vomiting? What's going on in your body? Because 70% of your immune system is in your gut microbiome, which is in your stomach and small intestines.
Now, would that be, these symptoms would happen after you're eating, or would they happen at any point in time during the day?
That's an interesting question. Sometimes it matters about transit time. Sometimes it depends if there are antibodies involved or it's just a digestive issue. Obviously, if you have anaphylaxis, that's an IgE food allergy, that happens pretty immediate, right? Because
Sure.
IgE, that's the gatekeeper.
Right.
If it's an IgG food sensitivity, it could happen several hours later because it takes a couple hours for you to digest your food. And we have something called MM. Now I'm not going to remember what it is, but it's it's the time it takes to digest the food and then for your body to sweep it out of your body. So sometimes we really should eat, 4 hours apart,
Right.
so that our body goes through the entire process. But sometimes we eat like 2 hours or 3 hours. So we never know if it's from the last meal or this one.
That's fair. Sure. So, I teach all of my students, clients to eat, we talk PFC every 3. So we eat balanced meals every 3 to 4 hours. So hopefully they'll be able to know based upon the timing whether it's a digestive issue or a food sensitivity issue or whatnot. But we'll get more into that later on, I think. Tell me more about the biome.
I just want to say I was talking about migrating motor complex.
Okay, got it.
Okay, but that's a huge topic. But I look at symptoms. I look at gas and bloating. I talk about stool with my clients. I don't know if do you talk about the Bristol stool chart with your clients?
We don't. Tell us a little bit about that.
A Bristol stool chart is basically a chart of different types of stool that anybody can have, right? And it ranges from type 1 to type 7. And type 1 is very constipated, and type 7 is very watery, like diarrhea, like extremely liquid. You can go on Google and you can look up Bristol stool chart, and you can look at pictures of it. I have it on my screen right now. You can look at images. Go on Google and just type stool chart or Bristol stool chart. And, a normal stool is a type 4, which is like a long sausage, or a type 3, which is a little bit lumpier. And, I ask clients, what are your stools like? And sometimes people have stools like every 3 days, and that's not normal.
No, it's not.
And that's normal for them. And I ask probing questions. Well, how often do you have a normal stool, and what time of day, and how often per day? We sort of get to what's going on? What are your symptoms? What do your stools look like? I also, to further answer the question, I look at blood work. I look at the albumin and total protein. That tells me if the body is absorbing nutrients, because you can intake all the nutrients you want that are proper, but if your body isn't breaking down the nutrients, digesting them, then they're not going to absorb the nutrients.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. So the first step is, hey, are you having any symptoms? What does your stool look like? Do you have gas and bloating? If you do, then you would go to the next step and do some blood tests, right?
Yeah, and you probably have blood tests just from going to your doctor. I mean, looking at total protein is in the complete metabolic panel.
Sure.
And it should be part of your annual blood work. It's a very simple thing to take a look at, and nobody really thinks about it. But I can recommend further testing from a functional medicine standpoint. I've been trained to read diagnostic tests from a company called GI Map from Diagnostic Solutions. And a doctor can have a direct relationship with this company and order the test, but not many doctors do. So what you can do is go on. There are a number of places you can order testing. The one that I use is mymedlab.com. You can open an account with them, pay for a stool test, and then this particular stool test gives you 5 pages of information as to exactly what is in your stool.
Wow.
And it shows you what the balance is. It tells you how much stomach acid you have, because stomach acid is very important in breaking down nutrients with intrinsic factor so that you can separate the proteins and from all the other nutrients and absorb them in the ileum, which is in the small intestines. So I've been trained to read this particular test and see, do you have an overgrowth of H. pylori? What is going on in your stool?
Right. So what would the indications be in your blood test that would make you want to go ahead and do further testing? Do you have sort of standard scores that you're looking for?
Well, in the complete metabolic panel, you'll get a number and a range. And when we look at lab markers, the physicians are trained to look at lab markers to see that you're in the reference range.
Mm-hmm.
And this is great that you're in the reference range, but just because you're in the reference range doesn't mean it's optimal, because 95% of the US population is considered in the typical reference range, but 80% of the US population is walking around with some type of chronic or autoimmune disease. So for a lab marker such as total protein or albumin, you want to be in the upper half of the reference range so that it's more optimal. Otherwise, if it's in the lower half of the reference range, it could be suboptimal and slightly you're not absorbing the nutrients that you're actually intaking.
So the albumin should be in the top half of the reference range
Mm-hmm.
for optimal health.
Mm-hmm. And total protein.
And total protein.
And those are just two lab markers. I mean, that's just an example of what I look at. But there are many lab markers. That was just the complete blood count. I'm sorry, the complete metabolic panel, but there's also a complete blood count to see what your white blood cells and your red blood cells are doing, to see if your iron if you have enough iron. Your doctor can check ferritin to see if you have enough iron storage. There are, millions of lab markers that you can look at.
Okay. Well, those sound like two good ones to start with. So I guess, I promised we wouldn't go very long on this, but so let's go ahead and wrap up. So I think the bottom line is, if you've got physical outward symptoms, then it makes sense to go ahead and do blood work. And, depending upon what your markers are, then you may want to go ahead and do a stool test as well. And this is something that you help your clients with all the time, right, Holly?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent. Great. All right. Well, guys, post any questions you have. Gut health is a big subject, and let me know where you'd like us to go next. Holly has graciously agreed to do a couple more interviews for us, so let me know what you'd like to hear from her. Until then, any parting words, Holly?
No, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And this is great.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.